The harsh autumn wind whipped across Naomi Carson's face as she stood on the porch of her father's general store, her eyes fixed on the dusty horizon where Benjamin Adams had disappeared 6 months ago. The year was 1885, and Mojave, Arizona Territory, was barely a town at all, just a collection of wooden buildings huddled together against the vast desert wilderness, a place where dreams either flourished or died beneath the relentless sun. "He's not coming back, Naomi," her father's voice came from behind her, gentle but firm. "That cowboy rode out with that mining company heiress. It's time you accepted that." Naomi's fingers tightened around the wooden railing. "I know what I saw, Pa." But doubt had crept into her heart like the desert scorpions that found their way into the darkest corners of their home, quiet, poisonous, and impossible to ignore. Benjamin had been everything to her. They had grown up together in this dusty corner of the territory, had planned a future together until the day Eliza Wellington arrived in her fancy coach, her father seeking to expand his mining empire. Within weeks, Benjamin was gone, and so was Eliza. The town gossips needed little encouragement to connect those two disappearances. "Miss Carson." Young Tommy Fisher came running up the street, kicking up dust with his worn boots. "Telegram just came in for you." Naomi's heart stuttered in her chest. In 6 months, not a single word had come from Benjamin. Not a letter, not a telegram, nothing but silence, and the growing conviction that what they'd shared had meant nothing to him. With trembling fingers, she accepted the yellow paper. Tommy lingered, his freckled face alive with curiosity, until her father shooed him away with the promise of a peppermint stick later. "Go on," her father urged, his weathered face creased with concern. "Read it." The telegram was brief, just like Benjamin had always been with words. "Returning to Mojave, stop, need to explain, stop Benjamin, stop, he's coming back," she whispered, her voice hollow. 6 months of anger and betrayal couldn't be erased by a simple telegram. Her father's hand settled on her shoulder. "What will you do?" Naomi folded the telegram carefully, tucking it into her pocket. "I'm going to hear what he has to say." Her voice hardened. "And then I'm going to tell him exactly where he can go." 2 days later, the stagecoach rolled into town in a cloud of dust. Naomi stood in the doorway of the store, her heart pounding against her ribs like a wild thing seeking escape. She had promised herself she wouldn't be here, wouldn't give him the satisfaction of knowing she'd been waiting, but her feet had carried her to this spot anyway. The first passenger to step down was a young woman with a baby in her arms, then an elderly gentleman. Finally, a tall figure in a dust-covered duster and wide-brimmed hat emerged from the coach. Benjamin looked different. Thinner, harder somehow. His face was more weathered than she remembered, and he moved with a slight limp that hadn't been there before. But his eyes, those blue eyes that had always reminded her of the Arizona sky after a summer rain, those were exactly the same. Those eyes found her immediately, as if drawn by some invisible force. For a moment, they simply stared at each other across the distance 20 feet of dusty street that somehow felt as vast as the desert itself. He took a step toward her, then another. Naomi remained frozen in place, unable to move forward, unwilling to retreat. "Naomi," he said when he reached her, his voice rough as if he hadn't used it in a long time. "Mr. Adams," she replied coldly, lifting her chin. She wouldn't call him Ben, not anymore. The corner of his mouth twitched, not quite a smile, but something pained. "I suppose I deserve that." "You deserve a lot more than that." Benjamin glanced around, noticing the curious eyes watching from windows and doorways. "Can we talk somewhere private? There's nothing to talk about." "There's everything to talk about," he insisted, his voice dropping lower. "I didn't leave with Eliza Wellington." Naomi's laugh was sharp enough to cut. "Half the town saw you ride out with her. I rode out the same day, not with her." His eyes pleaded with her. "Please, Naomi, 10 minutes of your time, that's all I'm asking." She shouldn't give him even 10 seconds. But the question that had tormented her for 6 months, why, demanded an answer. The back of the store. 10 minutes. She led him through the store, past her father who watched with wary eyes, and out to the small storage yard behind the building. Here, crates of merchandise awaited unpacking, and a lone cottonwood provided sparse shade from the afternoon sun. "Talk," she commanded, crossing her arms. Benjamin removed his hat, running a hand through hair that had grown longer than she remembered. I went to California. With Eliza Wellington. No, his denial was firm. I went to stake a mining claim. Naomi blinked. A mining claim. Your father made it clear he wouldn't give his blessing to a man with nothing to his name but a horse and a saddle. Benjamin's voice was steady now, his eyes never leaving hers. He was right. What kind of life could I give you? A drifter's life, moving from ranch to ranch, living in bunkhouses with other cowboys. You deserve better. So you just left, without a word. The pain that had simmered for months bubbled up, scalding hot. You made me believe I wrote to you, he interrupted. 3 letters. But when I never heard back, I figured you'd moved on. Then I heard in San Francisco that Eliza Wellington had been telling everyone I'd gone with her. He shook his head. Her father sent her away after she was caught with the blacksmith's son. She must have started that rumor to save face. Letters. Naomi felt the ground shift beneath her feet. I never received any letters. I sent them through Walter at the telegraph office. He promised to deliver them personally. Walter Jenkins, whose proposal Naomi had declined last spring, whose eyes had always followed her with a possessiveness that made her uncomfortable. Walter never gave me any letters, she said slowly, the pieces falling into place. I was afraid of that. Benjamin's jaw tightened. When I finally got word from my old friend Samuel that everyone in town believed I'd run off with Eliza, I knew I had to come back and set things right. And the mining claim? Naomi asked, still wary, still not ready to believe. Benjamin reached into his coat pocket and withdrew a folded document. It's real, gold, not a massive deposit, but enough. I've been working it for 5 months. He held out the paper to her. I sold half the claim last week. That's what took me so long to return. Naomi didn't reach for the document. So you left to get rich. I left to be worthy of you. The words came out in a rush, his composure cracking. I left because I couldn't bear to see the disappointment in your eyes when you realized I couldn't provide for you the way you deserve. I left because I love you too much to drag you into a life of hardship. You had no right to decide what I deserve or don't deserve. Anger flashed through her again. You had no right to decide what would make me happy. You're right, he admitted, lowering the document. I was wrong to leave without explaining. I thought I was doing the noble thing. The noble thing would have been to trust me, to trust us. Benjamin nodded slowly, his expression solemn. I know that now. A silence fell between them, filled with the weight of 6 months of misunderstandings and heartache. What happens now? Naomi finally asked, her voice softer. That depends on you. Benjamin took a hesitant step closer. I came back to explain, to set things right. But mostly I came back because every day away from you has been like living half a life. And if I can't forgive you, pain flickered across his face, then I'll have to live with that, but I'll never stop trying to earn your forgiveness. Naomi studied him, looking for any sign of deception, any indication that this was just another pretty lie. But all she saw was the man she'd loved since they were teenagers, changed, perhaps, but still Benjamin. I need time, she said finally. I can't just forget these past 6 months. I understand. He placed his hat back on his head. I've taken rooms at the hotel. I'll be in town for as long as it takes. As he turned to leave, Naomi found herself speaking. What did they say? The letters. Benjamin paused, looking back at her with eyes full of regret and hope. That I love you, that I'd come back for you, that everything I was doing was so we could have a future together. He left her standing in the yard, her mind whirling with conflicting emotions. Part of her wanted to call him back, to throw herself into his arms and erase the pain of the past 6 months. But another part, the part that had lain awake night after night, wondering why she hadn't been enough, held her back. That evening, Naomi confronted Walter Jenkins at the telegraph office. Letters from Benjamin Adams, she said without preamble. You never delivered them. Walter's thin face flushed, but he maintained his composure. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't lie to me, Walter. Benjamin sent 3 letters through you. Where are they, that saddled tramp? Walter sneered, his true colors showing at last. What could he offer you that I couldn't? My family has owned property here for 20 years. I have prospects, a future. You had no right, Naomi said, her voice shaking with anger. I was protecting you, Walter insisted. Everyone knows he left with that Wellington woman. I was saving you from further humiliation. Where are the letters? Walter's expression turned sullen. Burned them, all three, right after they arrived. The confession should have shocked her, but somehow she had known. You've lost my business, Walter, and if I had any say, you'd lose everyone else's too. You'll regret this, he called after her as she turned to leave. That cowboy will break your heart again. Naomi paused at the door. No, Walter. The only thing I regret is that I ever considered you a friend. She walked through the darkening streets of Mojave, her mind in turmoil. Benjamin hadn't left with Eliza Wellington. He had written to her. He had been working a gold claim for her. Her steps slowed as she approached the hotel. Lights burned in several windows, including one on the second floor where a tall silhouette moved back and forth. Benjamin, pacing as he always did when troubled. Before she could second-guess herself, Naomi entered the hotel and climbed the stairs. At the door to room 204, she hesitated only briefly before knocking. Benjamin opened the door, surprise evident on his face. He had removed his coat and rolled up his shirt sleeves, revealing forearms corded with new muscle evidence of the mining work he'd claimed to be doing. Naomi. Walter burned your letters, she said without preamble. He admitted it. Understanding dawned in Benjamin's eyes. That explains a lot. It doesn't explain everything. Naomi took a deep breath. You still left. Yes. He stepped back, inviting her in with a gesture. I still left. Naomi entered the small hotel room, noticing the open saddlebags on the bed and the mining equipment carefully arranged on the dresser. Evidence that he had been telling the truth. I talked to my father before I came here, she said, turning to face him. He admitted that he told you that you weren't good enough for me, that he'd never give his blessing to a cowboy with no prospects. Benjamin's expression tightened. He wasn't wrong. Yes, he was. Naomi's voice rose with emotion. You were always enough for me, Benjamin, just as you were. But not enough for the life you deserve. Benjamin ran a hand through his hair in frustration. Your father built something here. He gave you stability, security. What could I offer? A life following ranch work from season to season, living in some shack on someone else's property. That should have been my choice to make. You're right. Benjamin's shoulders sagged. I thought I was being selfless, but maybe I was just being a coward, afraid you'd choose that hard life with me and then grow to resent me for it. Naomi moved closer to him, close enough to see the flecks of gray in his blue eyes. I would have chosen you, every time. And now, the question hung between them, fragile as spider silk. Now I don't know, Naomi admitted. You hurt me, Benjamin. You made me believe you'd chosen someone else. You made me doubt everything we had, I know. His voice was rough with emotion. And I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you if you'll let me. Naomi studied his face, seeing the sincerity there, the regret, but also the love that had never dimmed. I need time. I need to trust you again. I understand. He nodded solemnly. I'm not going anywhere, Naomi, not again, not ever. Good, she said softly, because this time if you leave, I won't be waiting when you return. Benjamin reached for her hand hesitantly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. She didn't. His fingers closed around hers, warm and calloused from months of hard labor. I promise, he whispered. As Naomi left the hotel, she felt something unfurling in her chest, not forgiveness, not yet, but the possibility of it. For the first time in 6 months, she allowed herself to imagine a future with Benjamin Adams in it. The next morning, Naomi awoke to the sound of hammering. She dressed quickly and made her way downstairs to find her father already at the breakfast table, a knowing look on his weathered face. Your cowboy's making quite a racket across the street, he said, gesturing with his coffee cup. Naomi glanced out the window to see Benjamin and 2 other men working on the old Harper place a small building that had stood empty since Mr. Harper died the previous winter. What's he doing? She asked, though she already suspected the answer. Bought it yesterday afternoon, according to Hank at the land office. Her father watched her carefully. Paid cash. Naomi felt her heart quicken. He's staying, seems that way. Her father set down his cup. I may have been wrong about him, Naomi. Not many men would go off to make their fortune just to prove themselves worthy. You encouraged him to leave, she reminded him, unable to keep the accusation from her voice. Her father had the grace to look ashamed. I didn't think he'd actually do it. Most young men talk big but don't follow through. He proved me wrong. He hurt me, Pa. I know, darling. He reached across the table to pat her hand. And that's between the two of you to work out, but for what it's worth, I think he truly loves you. After breakfast, Naomi found herself walking toward the Harper place, drawn by curiosity and something deeper she wasn't ready to name. Benjamin was on the roof, replacing rotten shingles while the Peterson brothers worked on the porch below. He spotted her immediately, setting down his hammer and making his way carefully to the ladder. By the time she reached the building, he was waiting for her, his shirt damp with sweat despite the cool morning air. "Morning," he greeted her, a cautious hope in his eyes. "You bought the Harper place." "I did," he gestured to the small building. "It needs work, but it's solid. Good location too, right in town." "What are you planning to do with it?" Benjamin's smile was tentative. "I thought it might make a good assay office. The mine's producing well, and with more prospectors coming through, there's a need. And," he hesitated, "the back room's large enough for living quarters, not fancy but comfortable for a family someday." The implication was clear and Naomi felt her cheeks warm. "You're really planning to stay?" "I told you I would." His voice softened. "I'm not asking for answers today, Naomi. I know I have to earn back your trust. I just want you to see that I'm serious." Naomi nodded, touched by the gesture yet still wary. "I appreciate that." Before she could say more, a commotion from down the street caught their attention. A group of riders was approaching, led by a familiar figure that made Benjamin tense beside her. "Is that Eliza Wellington?" Naomi asked, recognizing the elaborate riding habit and the haughty posture. "It is," Benjamin confirmed, his expression darkening. "And that's her father beside her." The Wellingtons reined in their horses in front of the hotel, accompanied by several men who looked more like hired guns than companions. Eliza's gaze swept the street and locked on Benjamin and Naomi with calculated interest. "Trouble," Benjamin muttered. "What would they want in Mojave? I thought her father's mines were further north." "They are." Benjamin's jaw tightened, "but my claim borders one of his properties. He's been trying to buy me out since I struck gold. And you refused. The price wasn't right." His eyes remained on the Wellington party as they dismounted, and I had other reasons to hold on to it. Before Naomi could ask what those reasons were, Eliza Wellington was striding toward them, her riding skirt gathered in one gloved hand. Close up, she was even more beautiful than Naomi remembered, fair-haired and porcelain-skinned, with the kind of refined features that spoke of generations of wealth and privilege. "Benjamin Adams," she drawled, ignoring Naomi completely. "What a surprise finding you here." "I thought you were busy becoming a mining magnate in California." "Miss Wellington," Benjamin acknowledged stiffly, "I wasn't aware you had business in Mojave." "Oh, we're just passing through." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Father has some matters to discuss with you." "That obstinate streak of yours is becoming quite tiresome." "I've made my position clear. My claim isn't for sale at the price you're offering." Eliza's gaze finally shifted to Naomi, a dismissive appraisal that made Naomi's spine stiffen. "I see you've reconnected with your friend. How quaint." "Miss Carson is indeed a friend," Benjamin replied, his tone cooling further. "And I'd appreciate if you'd address her with respect." "Of course." Eliza's smile turned predatory. "Miss Carson, isn't it? I've heard so much about you. Benjamin spoke of you often during our time together in San Francisco." Naomi felt a chill at the implication. She glanced at Benjamin, whose expression had hardened into granite. "That's a lie, Eliza, and you know it," he said quietly. "We met exactly twice in San Francisco, both times at your father's office with at least 3 other people present." "Is that what he told you?" Eliza asked Naomi, feigning surprise. Men can be such accomplished liars when it suits them. "I could tell you stories that would make you think twice about trusting him again." "I think I've heard enough," Naomi replied coolly, finding her voice at last. "If you'll excuse us, Miss Wellington, we have work to do." She turned to leave, but Eliza's next words stopped her cold. "Did he tell you why he really came back to this dusty little town?" "It wasn't for love, my dear. It was because my father threatened to have his claim revoked unless he sold it to us. Benjamin's always known which side his bread is buttered on." Naomi looked at Benjamin, searching his face for the truth. His expression was tight with anger, but there was no guilt there, no sign that Eliza's words had hit their mark. "Your father can try to challenge my claim," Benjamin told Eliza, his voice steady. "But we both know it's legitimate and properly registered. As for why I returned to Mojave," he glanced at Naomi, his eyes softening, "that had nothing to do with business and everything to do with what matters most." Eliza's pretty face twisted with displeasure. "Father will speak with you later. Don't think this discussion is over." She turned on her heel and strode back to where her father waited, her back rigid with anger. "I'm sorry about that," Benjamin said when she was out of earshot. "The Wellingtons aren't used to being refused." "Is it true," Naomi asked, "about your claim?" "The part about it being legitimate. Yes, the rest was just Eliza trying to cause trouble." Naomi nodded slowly, processing this new complication. "Be careful, Benjamin. Men like Edward Wellington don't take kindly to being thwarted." "I know." His expression was grim. "But I won't be bullied into selling what's rightfully mine. Not when I worked so hard for it." She studied him, seeing a new determination in his stance, a confidence that hadn't been there before he left. Whatever else had happened in California, Benjamin Adams had found his strength. "I should let you get back to work," she said, gesturing to the half-finished roof. "Will I see you later?" The question was casual, but his eyes betrayed its importance. "Perhaps," she replied, unwilling to commit but not wanting to refuse. As she walked away, Naomi felt Eliza Wellington's eyes burning into her back. The woman's arrival complicated things, stirring up doubts that Naomi had just begun to set aside. Had there been something between Benjamin and Eliza after all? Was there more to Benjamin's return than he was telling her? The questions followed her all the way back to the general store, where she threw herself into work to distract from the turmoil in her heart. Late that afternoon, the door to the store opened to admit Edward Wellington himself. He was a large man with a carefully groomed beard and the kind of expensive clothing rarely seen in Mojave. "Miss Carson," he greeted her with practiced courtesy. "I wonder if I might have a word with you in private." Naomi glanced at her father, who nodded slightly. "We can speak in the office." She led Wellington to the small room at the back of the store where her father kept the accounts. The mining magnate looked out of place among the ledgers and simple furnishings. "What can I do for you, Mr. Wellington?" she asked, remaining standing when he seated himself without invitation. "I understand you and Mr. Adams have a connection," he began, his voice smooth as oiled leather. "I thought you might want to know the truth about his activities in California. Benjamin has already told me about his mining claim. Has he told you everything?" Wellington raised an eyebrow. "About how he acquired it, about the original owner who mysteriously disappeared after filing the claim, about how my daughter helped him navigate the filing process." Naomi felt her stomach tighten. "What are you implying?" "Nothing, my dear, simply stating facts." Wellington's smile didn't reach his cold eyes. "Adams is a clever man, ambitious, not above using whatever or whoever might help him achieve his goals. If you're suggesting that Benjamin did something illegal, I'm suggesting nothing of the sort," Wellington interrupted. "The law has no quarrel with Mr. Adams, but there are questions of moral character that might concern a young woman considering a future with him." Naomi straightened her spine. "Mr. Wellington, I appreciate your concern, but my relationship with Benjamin Adams is none of your business." "Perhaps not," he conceded, rising to his feet. "But I thought you deserved to know what kind of man you're dealing with. A man who would stake a claim knowing it encroached on another's property. A man who would lead a young woman on my daughter to gain information about mining regulations." "Your daughter seems quite capable of taking care of herself," Naomi observed. Wellington's affable mask slipped for a moment, revealing something harder beneath. "Think about what I've said, Miss Carson. Adams isn't what he seems. And when the truth comes out, as it inevitably will, you might wish you'd been more cautious." After he left, Naomi sank into her father's chair, her mind racing. Wellington's insinuations had planted new seeds of doubt, unwelcome as they were. What did she really know about Benjamin's time in California? What if he had changed more than she realized? She was still sitting there when her father found her an hour later. "Wellington came to see you," he asked, concern etching his features. Naomi nodded. He tried to turn me against Benjamin, implied that he did something dishonest to get his claim. Her father snorted. Wellington's never met a claim he didn't think he should own, been squeezing out smaller miners for years. You don't think there could be any truth to it? I think, her father said carefully, that you should ask Benjamin directly. If there's one thing I've learned about that young man, it's that he'll give you the straight truth, even when it costs him. That evening, Naomi walked to the small restaurant on the edge of town where Benjamin had asked to meet her for supper. It was a modest establishment, but the best Mojave had to offer, and she knew he was trying to impress her. He was waiting outside, freshly shaved and dressed in clean clothes, his hair still damp from washing. The sight of him so familiar yet somehow new made her heart skip despite her lingering doubts. "You look beautiful," he said simply when she approached. "Thank you." She allowed him to open the door for her. "You clean up well yourself." Inside, they were seated at a corner table, away from the curious eyes of the other diners. Benjamin ordered for both of them after consulting her preferences, a courtesy that reminded her of the considerate man she had fallen in love with. When they were alone again, Naomi decided directness was best. "Edward Wellington came to see me today." Benjamin's expression darkened. "What did he want to warn me about you?" She met his gaze steadily. "He suggested that there were irregularities with how you acquired your claim." "Of course he did." Benjamin's laugh was bitter. "Wellington can't stand that a saddled tramp like me found gold on land he coveted." "Is there any truth to it?" Benjamin was silent for a long moment, and Naomi felt her heart sink. Then he reached into his pocket and withdrew a folded document. "This is the bill of sale," he said, placing it on the table between them. "I bought the claim from an old prospector named Harris who was dying of consumption. Paid him a fair price, everything I had saved over years of cowboying, plus money I borrowed from a friend. Harris was grateful, said he'd rather see his claim go to someone who'd work it than have it fall into Wellington's hands after he died." Naomi examined the document. It appeared legitimate, with the proper seals and signatures. "Wellington knows this," Benjamin continued. "He tried to challenge it in court but lost. That's why he's trying other tactics now, including trying to turn you against me." "And Eliza, did you use her to gain information, as her father claimed?" Benjamin's jaw tightened. "I never led Eliza Wellington on. She offered to help me understand some of the paperwork involved in registering the claim for a price." "What price?" Naomi asked, her voice barely audible. "She wanted me to escort her to social functions, to make another suitor jealous. I refused." "Why would she help you at all?" "Because it annoyed her father," Benjamin said simply. "From what I gathered, she enjoys defying him whenever possible, and because she thought I might be useful to her in other ways later." Their food arrived, interrupting the conversation. Naomi used the opportunity to gather her thoughts. Benjamin's explanation rang true, consistent with what she knew of the Wellingtons from town gossip. Edward Wellington was known to be ruthless in business, and his daughter had a reputation for rebelliousness. "I believe you," she said finally, after they had eaten in silence for several minutes. "But I don't understand why the Wellingtons would come all the way to Mojave just because you wouldn't sell your claim." "It's not just my claim they want," Benjamin explained, lowering his voice. "There's a reason I was so determined to hold on to it, beyond providing for our future. Harris told me something before he died, something Wellington would pay dearly to know." Naomi leaned forward. "What?" "There's a map, Harris's map, showing the true extent of the gold deposits. According to him, the richest vein runs right under Wellington's property, but Wellington doesn't know it. He's been mining in the wrong place for years. And you have this map," Benjamin nodded. "Harris gave it to me along with the claim, said I seemed like a decent sort who wouldn't use it to hurt the small miners in the area. Wellington has suspected something like this exists, but he doesn't know I have it. That's why he's so determined to buy you out," Naomi realized. "He thinks you'll eventually lead him to the main vein." "Exactly. And why I couldn't tell anyone, why I was really holding out, not even in my letters to you, if word got back to Wellington. It could be dangerous," Naomi finished for him. The pieces were falling into place, painting a picture very different from the one Wellington had tried to present. I never meant for any of this to touch you, Benjamin said, reaching across the table to take her hand. I came back to make things right between us, not to involve you in my troubles with Wellington. I'm already involved, she pointed out, not withdrawing her hand from his. And I'd rather know the truth, complicated as it is, than be protected from it. Benjamin's thumb traced circles on her palm, sending shivers up her arm. I've missed you, Naomi, every day, every hour. The simple sincerity in his voice broke through the last of her defenses. She had missed him too, the quiet strength of him, the way he looked at her as if she were the most precious thing in his world. I've missed you too, she admitted softly, his eyes lit with hope. Does that mean you might forgive me? Eventually, I'm working on it. She offered him a small smile. It helps to understand why you left the way you did, even if I still think you should have told me. I promise you this, Benjamin said, his expression solemn. From now on, no secrets between us. No matter how difficult the truth might be, I'll hold you to that. As they walked back through town after dinner, Benjamin kept a respectful distance, though Naomi could sense his desire to be closer. The evening air had cooled considerably, and she found herself wishing she'd brought a heavier shawl. Noticing her shiver, Benjamin removed his coat and draped it around her shoulders without comment. The garment was warm from his body, carrying his scent, leather and soap, and something uniquely him. Thank you, she murmured, drawing it closer around her. They were passing the hotel when the doors burst open and Eliza Wellington emerged, accompanied by two of her father's men. She was clearly agitated, her usually perfect appearance slightly disheveled. There you are, she exclaimed when she spotted Benjamin. Father wants to see you, now. Benjamin's expression hardened. It's late, Miss Wellington. Whatever business your father has can wait until morning. It can't wait, Eliza insisted, her eyes darting nervously to Naomi. He knows about the map, Benjamin. Someone told him. Benjamin went very still. What has he done? He sent men to your rooms. They've torn the place apart looking for it. Eliza's voice dropped lower. He's furious, Benjamin. I've never seen him like this. You need to give him what he wants. Or what? Benjamin's voice was dangerously quiet. Eliza's gaze slid away from his. He said to remind you that accidents happen in mining towns all the time, to all sorts of people. The threat was unmistakable, and Naomi felt a chill that had nothing to do with the evening air. Go back to your father, Benjamin told Eliza, his tone leaving no room for argument. Tell him if he threatens me or anyone I care about again, I'll take that map straight to the territorial governor. See how well his mining empire survives a full investigation. Eliza hesitated, then nodded curtly. Your funeral, she muttered before turning and walking back into the hotel. We need to go, Benjamin said to Naomi, taking her elbow gently. It's not safe here now. My father will stop at your house and explain, but then I need to get you somewhere safe until I deal with Wellington. They hurried through the darkening streets, Benjamin constantly scanning their surroundings. Naomi could feel the tension radiating from him, and she understood now why he had been so secretive. This wasn't just about a mining claim. It was about standing up to a powerful man who was used to getting his way, no matter the cost. At her home, her father listened gravely to Benjamin's explanation. You've stirred up a hornet's nest, son, he said when Benjamin had finished. I know, sir. And I'm sorry to bring this trouble to your door, but Wellington needs to be stopped. He's been squeezing out honest miners for years, using threats and intimidation. What do you propose to do? Get Naomi somewhere safe, then confront Wellington with what I know. I have evidence of his past dealings that he wouldn't want made public. And if he doesn't back down, her father asked, Benjamin's expression was grim, then I'll take that evidence to the authorities. Naomi had been silent during this exchange, but now she spoke up. I'm not hiding while you face Wellington alone. Naomi, no. She cut him off firmly. If we're going to have no secrets between us, that means facing problems together. I'm not some delicate flower that needs protecting, Benjamin. He looked at her for a long moment, and she could see the struggle within him, the desire to keep her safe, warring with respect for her determination. She gets that stubborn streak from her mother, her father remarked dryly. Benjamin finally nodded. All right, but we do this carefully. They formulated a plan. Naomi would stay with her father at the store, which could be easily secured. Benjamin would retrieve the map and other evidence from their hiding place, not in his rooms, as Wellington had assumed, but in a lockbox buried near the old oak tree outside of town where he and Naomi used to meet. "Be careful," Naomi said as he prepared to leave. Benjamin paused at the door, his eyes finding hers. In that moment, all the barriers between them seemed to fall away, and she saw what she had always seen in him, a good man trying to do right in a world that didn't always make that easy. "I will," he promised. Then, as if he couldn't help himself, he stepped back to her and pressed a gentle kiss to her forehead. "For luck," he murmured before disappearing into the night. The hours of waiting were the longest of Naomi's life. She and her father took turns watching at the windows while the other tried to rest. As dawn approached with no sign of Benjamin, Naomi's worry grew until it was a physical ache in her chest. "He should have been back by now," she said, pacing the small living room behind the store. Her father checked his pocket watch. "Give him time, Naomi. The old oak is a fair distance." What if Wellington's men found him? What if the sound of hoofbeats outside interrupted her dark imaginings? Naomi rushed to the window, her heart in her throat, but it wasn't Benjamin approaching, it was the town marshal, Frank Cooper, accompanied by 2 deputies. Her father opened the door before they could knock. "Frank, what brings you here at this hour?" Marshal Cooper removed his hat, his expression grave. "There's been trouble, Gerald, at the Wellington camp outside town. Shots fired. We're gathering a posse." "Benjamin," Naomi asked, her voice barely audible. "Is he no sign of Adams?" Cooper assured her quickly. "But one of Wellington's men is dead and another wounded. Wellington's claiming Adams ambushed them." "That's a lie," Naomi said fiercely. "Benjamin wouldn't—" "I'm not saying I believe Wellington," Cooper interrupted. "But I need to find Adams and hear his side of things before this gets any worse." Her father placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. "We haven't seen Benjamin since last night, Frank. He left to retrieve some documents." Cooper nodded slowly. "If you do see him, tell him to come to me directly." Better that than having trigger-happy deputies finding him first. After the marshal left, Naomi turned to her father, her face pale but determined. "I know where he might go. The place he buried the lockbox. It's where we used to meet when we were younger." "Naomi, it's not safe. I have to find him before the posse does, Pa. You heard what the marshal said." Her father studied her face, then sighed heavily. "Take my horse and be careful." The ride to the old oak seemed to take forever, though in reality it couldn't have been more than 20 minutes. The sun was just cresting the eastern hills, casting long shadows across the landscape, when Naomi reined in her horse near the massive tree that had stood sentinel over so many of her and Benjamin's young dreams. "Benjamin," she called softly, scanning the area for any sign of him. A slight movement from the other side of the tree caught her attention. She dismounted quickly, leading her horse around the massive trunk. Relief flooded through her at the sight of Benjamin, alive and apparently unharmed, though his clothes were dusty and there was a grin set to his jaw. "Naomi." His surprise gave way quickly to concern. "What are you doing here? It's not safe." "There's a posse forming in town," she told him hurriedly. "One of Wellington's men is dead. They're saying you did it." Benjamin shook his head. "I was nowhere near their camp. I came straight here after leaving you." "Then who?" "I think Wellington's men turned on each other." He gestured to the freshly disturbed earth at the base of the tree. "The lockbox is gone. Someone got here before me. How could they have known where to look? I don't know." Benjamin ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "Only 2 people knew about this place, you and me." "And Samuel," Naomi reminded him. "Your friend in town who told you about the rumors. You must have mentioned it in your letters to him." Benjamin's expression darkened. "Samuel worked for Wellington 6 months ago. I didn't know it then. So Wellington could have been watching you all along, even in California. It looks that way." Benjamin glanced around uneasily. "We need to move. If they found this place, they might come back." "The marshal wants you to turn yourself in to explain your side of things." Benjamin hesitated, clearly torn. "If I go to town now, Wellington will make sure I never get a fair hearing. He has too much influence." "Then what do we do?" "There's a federal marshal in Tucson," Benjamin said thoughtfully. An honest man from what I've heard. If we can get to him, show him the evidence. But the evidence was in the lockbox, Naomi pointed out. Not all of it. Benjamin reached into his shirt and withdrew a folded piece of paper. I kept the most important document with me, the original bill of sale for the claim, with Harris's sworn statement about Wellington's illegal activities on the back. And I have this. He produced a small leather pouch from his pocket and emptied its contents into his palm, a half-dozen gold nuggets, each the size of a man's thumbnail. These came from the new vein, the one Wellington doesn't know about yet, proof that Harris's map was accurate. Naomi looked from the gold to Benjamin's determined face. So we go to Tucson? He searched her eyes. Naomi, this isn't your fight. It became my fight when Wellington threatened you. She took his hand, the one holding the nuggets. When will you understand? I don't want to be protected. I want to stand beside you. Benjamin's expression softened, and for a moment she caught a glimpse of the future. They might have a partnership of equals, facing whatever came their way together. It's a 2-day ride to Tucson, he said finally. Hard country. I'm stronger than I look. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. That I've always known. They made a plan quickly. Benjamin would circle around to the abandoned Reeves cabin on the north edge of town where he'd left his horse. Naomi would return home for supplies, then meet him there within the hour. They would travel south, avoiding the main roads where Wellington's men might be watching. As she turned to mount her horse, Benjamin caught her arm gently. Naomi, he said, his voice low and intense. If you come with me, there's no turning back. Your reputation, my reputation, matters less to me than the truth, she replied firmly. And less than you. The admission hung between them, a bridge spanning the chasm of the past 6 months. Benjamin's eyes darkened, and for a moment she thought he might kiss her. Instead, he squeezed her hand once, then helped her mount. 1 hour, he reminded her. If I'm not at the cabin, don't wait, go back to town. I'll be there, she promised, and so will you. The ride back to town seemed different somehow, charged with purpose and possibility. Naomi's mind raced with plans and preparations. They would need food, water, blankets for the nights that would be cold in the desert. Money. Her father would worry, but he would understand. She was so absorbed in her thoughts that she almost missed the riders approaching from the west, 4 men, moving fast, led by Edward Wellington himself. Naomi quickly guided her horse into a stand of cottonwoods, watching as the group passed by on the main trail, heading in the direction of the old oak. They knew. Somehow, they knew Benjamin would go there. Spurring her horse to a gallop, Naomi took a different route back to town, cutting across open country rather than following the trail. She had to warn Benjamin, had to reach the Reeves cabin before Wellington's men realized their quarry had already left the oak tree. In town, she dismounted at her run, bursting into the store where her father was helping a customer. Pa, she gasped, I need your help. Now. 10 minutes later, she had gathered the essential supplies and was preparing to leave when the store door opened again. Naomi turned, expecting to see her father returning from the stable with the second horse he'd promised her, and found herself facing Eliza Wellington instead. The blonde woman was alone, her expression uncharacteristically uncertain. Where is he? Eliza asked without preamble. Naomi straightened, her hand moving instinctively toward the rifle her father kept under the counter. I don't know what you're talking about. Benjamin. Eliza glanced nervously toward the window. My father's men are looking for him. They have orders to shoot on sight. Why are you telling me this? Because I don't want his blood on my hands. Eliza's perfect composure cracked slightly. I never meant for things to go this far. Father's obsessed with that claim, with the map. The map that your father's men stole this morning. What? No. Eliza looked genuinely confused. Father doesn't have any map. That's why he's so furious. Naomi studied the other woman carefully, looking for signs of deception. If your father doesn't have it, who does? I don't know. Eliza took a step closer, lowering her voice. Listen to me. Benjamin needs to leave the territory. Now, father won't stop until he gets what he wants. Why do you care what happens to Benjamin? Naomi challenged. You barely know him. Eliza's laugh was bitter. Because unlike what everyone thinks, I'm not completely heartless. And because Benjamin was kind to me when he had no reason to be. Something in her tone made Naomi pause. What do you mean, in San Francisco at one of Father's business dinners? Eliza's gaze dropped. A business associate was, insistent in his attentions, Benjamin intervened. Escorted me home safely, never mentioned it again. The story rang true, exactly the kind of thing Benjamin would do, without fanfare or expectation of gratitude. My father is at the old oak tree, Eliza continued. He received an anonymous tip that Benjamin would be there. But his men are watching all the roads out of town. Why are you helping us now? Because I owe him that much. Eliza moved toward the door. There's a ravine 2 miles south of town that leads to the old Mission Trail. It's not watched. Take that route. She paused with her hand on the doorknob. And tell Benjamin, tell him I'm sorry. After she left, Naomi finished her preparations quickly, her mind processing this new information. If Wellington didn't have the map, then who did? And who had tipped him off about the oak tree? Her father returned with the second horse, his face lined with worry. The town's crawling with Wellington's men, he reported, and the marshal's posse is gathering at his office. I need to get to Benjamin, Naomi said, securing the last of the supplies. Eliza Wellington just told me there's a ravine south of town that isn't being watched. Eliza Wellington. Her father's eyebrows rose. Can you trust her? I'm not sure, Naomi admitted, but I don't have many options right now. Her father helped her load the supplies onto the second horse. I still think you should let me come with you. Someone needs to tell the marshal the truth about what's happening, Naomi reminded him. You're the only one he'll believe without question. He nodded reluctantly. Be careful, daughter. Wellington's a dangerous man. We'll be fine, Pa. She hugged him tightly. We'll send word when we reach Tucson. As she prepared to leave through the back door of the store, her father pressed something into her hand, his old revolver, worn but reliable. Just in case, he said quietly. Naomi tucked the weapon into her saddlebag with a silent prayer that she wouldn't need to use it. The journey to the Reeves cabin was tense, every shadow potentially hiding one of Wellington's men. Naomi kept to the back alleys and service paths, leading both horses as quietly as possible. When she finally reached the abandoned structure on the outskirts of town, her nerves were stretched to breaking. Benjamin, she called softly, approaching the weathered door. No answer came. Heart pounding, she pushed the door open slowly, half expecting to find the worst. The cabin was empty, with no sign that Benjamin had ever been there. His horse was gone from the lean to where he had said it would be. Had Wellington's men found him first? Had Eliza betrayed them after all? Naomi was debating what to do next when a soft whistle came from the copse of trees behind the cabin, a familiar pattern that she and Benjamin had used as teenagers when meeting in secret. Relief flooding through her, she led the horses toward the sound. Benjamin emerged from the trees, leading his own mount, his expression a mixture of caution and relief. Wellington's men were watching the cabin, he explained in a low voice. I saw them arrive just before I got here. Your friend Samuel must have told them about this place too. Benjamin's jaw tightened. Samuel has a lot to answer for when this is over. Quickly, Naomi told him about her encounter with Eliza and the information she had provided. Do you think she was telling the truth? Benjamin asked when she had finished, about the ravine not being watched. I don't know, but it's our best option right now. They mounted their horses, Benjamin taking the lead as they circled wide around the cabin and headed south. The terrain grew rougher, the scrubby vegetation giving way to rocky outcroppings that provided cover from prying eyes. Did you see any sign of who might have taken the lockbox? Naomi asked as they rode. Benjamin shook his head. The ground was too hard for tracks, but whoever it was knew exactly where to look. Could it have been Samuel, possibly, or someone working for him? Benjamin glanced back at her. Eliza said her father doesn't have the map. That's what she claimed. She seemed sincere. Then we have another player in this game, Benjamin said grimly, someone else who wants what Harris knew. They rode in silence for a time, each lost in their own thoughts. The ravine Eliza had mentioned came into view, a narrow gash in the earth that would indeed provide concealment for travelers heading south. Looks clear, Benjamin observed after scanning the area carefully. But stay close to me just in case. They guided their horses down the steep path into the ravine, where the air was noticeably cooler in the shadow of the high walls. The path was narrow but passable, winding between boulders and patches of stubborn vegetation. "If we follow this to the end, we'll reach the old mission trail," Benjamin said. "From there, it's a straight shot to Tucson." Naomi nodded, feeling a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. She had never done anything like this before fleeing across the desert with a wanted man, carrying gold and evidence of corruption. Yet somehow it felt right to be here, with Benjamin fighting for the truth. They had traveled perhaps a mile down the ravine when the sound of distant gunfire reached them, sharp cracks that echoed off the stone walls. "That's coming from town," Benjamin said, reining in his horse. "A lot of shots." "The posse must have confronted Wellington's men," Naomi suggested, her stomach tight with worry for her father. "Or Wellington found someone else to blame for his troubles." Benjamin's expression was grim. "We need to keep moving. There's nothing we can do to help from here." As they continued down the ravine, the path narrowed further, forcing them to ride single file. Benjamin led, constantly scanning the way ahead, while Naomi kept watch behind them. The walls of the ravine rose higher, casting them into deep shadow despite the morning sun. "Almost to the junction," Benjamin called back to her. "Another half-mile and we'll reach the mission trail." That was when they heard it, the unmistakable sound of horses approaching from behind them, many horses moving fast. "Ride," Benjamin urged, spurring his mount forward. "Don't look back." They galloped down the narrow path, the horses struggling for purchase on the loose stones. Naomi's heart pounded in her ears, drowning out everything but the thunder of hooves and Benjamin's occasional shout of encouragement. The junction appeared ahead, a place where the ravine widened and split in 3 directions. Benjamin reined in sharply, waiting for her to catch up. "Which way?" Naomi gasped, her horse blowing hard beneath her. Benjamin pointed to the rightmost path. "That one leads to the mission trail." "But they'll expect us to take it." The sound of pursuit grew louder. They had perhaps 2 minutes before their pursuers would be upon them. "We need to split up," Benjamin said, his expression torn. "Draw them off." "No," Naomi protested immediately. "We stay together." "Naomi, no." She fixed him with a determined stare. "We've been separated once already. I won't let it happen again." Something shifted in Benjamin's eyes, a recognition, perhaps, of the strength of her commitment. He nodded once, then gestured to the leftmost path. "That route is longer, but it also leads to the mission trail eventually. They might think we took the direct route." Without waiting for further discussion, they urged their horses toward the left path, which climbed steeply up the side of the ravine. The going was slower here, the trail less defined, but the vegetation was thicker, providing better cover. They had just crested the first rise when their pursuers reached the junction below 6 riders, led by a man Naomi didn't recognize but whom Benjamin identified with a muttered curse. Griggs. Wellington's head of security. The men paused at the junction, conferring briefly before splitting up 4, taking the right path toward the mission trail, while Griggs and one other man examined the ground more carefully. "They'll figure it out soon enough," Benjamin whispered, pulling Naomi deeper into the cover of a large mesquite. "We need to find a place to hole up until dark." They continued climbing, staying off the trail when possible, using the increasingly dense vegetation for concealment. The terrain grew rockier, dotted with small caves and overhangs that might provide shelter. "There," Benjamin pointed to a narrow opening in the rock face, barely visible behind a stand of scrubby pines. "That might work." They dismounted, leading the horses carefully toward the opening. It was indeed a cave, small but deep enough to conceal them and their mounts from casual observation. "We'll wait here until sundown," Benjamin decided after they had settled the horses at the back of the cave. "Then continue to the mission trail under cover of darkness." Naomi nodded, trying to ignore the churning anxiety in her stomach. Her father was back in Mojave, possibly in danger. Wellington's men were combing the hills for them, and someone unknown, had Harris's map and the rest of the evidence from the lockbox. "What are you thinking?" Benjamin asked softly, noticing her troubled expression. "That I never expected my life to turn into this kind of adventure," she admitted with a wan smile. General store owner's daughter on the run from mining magnates. Do you regret coming? His question was careful, neutral, but she could hear the underlying concern. Naomi considered the question honestly. The past 24 hours had been terrifying, exhausting, and completely outside her experience. Yet there was also a clarity to it, a sense that she was exactly where she needed to be, doing what was right. No, she said finally. I don't regret it. Benjamin's relief was visible. I never wanted to bring this trouble to your door, Naomi. When I came back to Mojave, I thought I had everything under control. Life rarely goes according to plan, she observed, settling herself more comfortably against the cave wall. 6 months ago, I thought we would be married by now. We still could be, he said quietly, once this is over. The simple statement hung between them, a promise and a question all at once. Naomi really looked at him, and saw both the boy she had fallen in love with and the man he had become. Stronger, yes, more determined. But still Benjamin, with his quiet integrity and the heart that had always been too big for his own good. Yes, she said, her voice steady. We could be. The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise after the longest night. They spent the day in the cave, taking turns keeping watch at the entrance while the other rested. Occasionally they heard the distant sounds of riders, but none came close enough to discover their hiding place. By late afternoon, the immediate danger seemed to have passed. They must have decided we took the other path after all, Benjamin surmised as the shadows began to lengthen outside. We should be able to move out soon. Naomi, who had been rationing their water supply, passed him the canteen. How long to Tucson from here? If we ride through the night, we could make it by tomorrow afternoon. And then we find Federal Marshal Harkins, show him the evidence and let the law take its course. Benjamin took a long drink, then passed the canteen back. Wellington has powerful friends, but even he can't ignore a federal investigation. What about your claim? The gold, Benjamin's expression turned thoughtful. With Wellington exposed, the smaller miners in the area will have a chance again. Maybe I'll go back to working the claim. Build that assay office in Mojave after all. And that's what you want? Naomi asked, watching him carefully. To be a miner, not a cowboy. What I want, Benjamin said slowly, meeting her gaze, is a life with you. The how of it matters less than the who. The simple sincerity of his words touched something deep within her. This was the Benjamin she remembered, the man who saw through the complications to what truly mattered. When we get back, she said, I'll help you rebuild the Harper place. His smile was answer enough. As dusk fell, they prepared to leave, checking their supplies and readying the horses. The plan was simple. Follow the ridge to where it rejoined the mission trail, then ride hard for Tucson. They were nearly ready when the sound of a single horse approaching made them freeze. Benjamin motioned for Naomi to stay back as he crept to the cave entrance, his hand on his revolver. The rider came into view, a lone figure silhouetted against the darkening sky. To Naomi's astonishment, Benjamin suddenly relaxed, holstering his weapon. Samuel, he called softly. The rider turned toward the cave, then dismounted quickly. Ben, thank God I found you. Samuel Hayes was a slight man with sharp features and nervous eyes. As he approached the cave, Naomi noticed the fresh bruises on his face and the way he favored his left side. Wellington's men did that to you? Benjamin asked, noticing the same details. Samuel nodded grimly. When they couldn't find you, they decided I must know where you were hiding. They were persuasive in their questioning. Yet here you are, Naomi observed, not bothering to hide her suspicion. How did you find us when Wellington's men couldn't? I know Ben, Samuel replied simply. I figured he'd avoid the obvious routes, and I remembered him mentioning these caves once years ago. Benjamin studied his old friend's face. Why are you here, Samuel? Last I heard, you were working for Wellington. I was, Samuel admitted. Small salary to feed him information about the miners in the area, nothing that seemed important at the time. Until it was about me, Samuel had the grace to look ashamed. I didn't know what he was planning, Ben. I swear it. When I realized he meant to take your claim by force, I tried to back out. That's when things got complicated. Complicated how? Naomi asked. Samuel glanced around nervously, as if expecting Wellington's men to materialize from the shadows. I know who took the map and the other evidence from the lockbox. Benjamin went very still. Who? Walter Jenkins. Walter, Naomi gasped. The telegraph operator, Samuel nodded. He's been working for Wellington longer than I have. When Ben told me about burying the lockbox at the Old Oak, I mentioned it to Walter. I didn't know he would steal it. But Wellington doesn't have the map, Benjamin said, confusion evident in his voice. Because Walter decided to double-cross everyone, Samuel explained. He's been feeding information to Wellington for years, but he's also been skimming money from the telegraph office. When he realized what the map was worth, he decided to sell it to the highest bidder. Which is why Wellington's so desperate to find us, Naomi realized. He thinks Benjamin still has it. And why there was gunfire in town this morning, Samuel added. Wellington's men tried to take Walter by force. The marshal intervened. It got messy. Benjamin's expression darkened. Is anyone hurt? Marshal Cooper took a bullet in the shoulder. One of Wellington's men is dead. Walter escaped in the confusion with the map. And my father, Naomi asked, her heart in her throat. He's fine, Samuel assured her quickly. Helping tend to the marshal last I saw, Wellington's holed up in the hotel with what's left of his men. The town's in an uproar. Benjamin exchanged a look with Naomi. This changed everything. If Walter had the map and the other evidence, going to Tucson might be pointless. We need to find Walter before he sells that map, Benjamin said. Any idea where he might have gone? Samuel shook his head. He has family in California, but that's a long journey to make alone with Wellington's men looking for him. He might try to reach the railroad at Maricopa, Naomi suggested. It's closer than Tucson, and from there he could go anywhere. That makes sense, Benjamin agreed. Samuel, did you see any sign of Wellington's men on your way here? Two groups searching the lower trails. None up this high that I saw. Benjamin nodded decisively. Then we head for Maricopa. If we ride through the night, we might intercept Walter before he reaches the railroad. As they prepared to leave, Naomi found herself watching Samuel. Something about his story didn't quite add up. Why would he risk Wellington's wrath to help them? And how had he found them so easily when Wellington's experienced trackers had failed? She shared her concerns with Benjamin as they mounted up, keeping her voice low. I don't fully trust him either, Benjamin admitted. But if he's telling the truth about Walter, we need to act fast, and having a third rider with us isn't a bad idea if we run into trouble. They set out as darkness fell completely, Samuel taking the lead since he claimed to know a shortcut to the trail that would take them to Maricopa. The night was clear. Stars spread across the sky like diamonds on black velvet, providing just enough light to navigate by. They rode in silence for the most part, conserving their energy and staying alert for any sign of pursuit. Naomi found herself watching Samuel's back, studying the set of his shoulders and the way he frequently checked the terrain around them. He seemed genuinely nervous, but was it fear of Wellington's men or guilt over leading them into a trap? After several hours of hard riding, they stopped briefly to rest the horses and drink from a small spring Samuel knew of. As Benjamin checked the animals, Naomi approached Samuel where he stood a little apart, scanning the horizon. You said Walter has been working for Wellington for years, she said conversationally. How did you discover that? Samuel glanced at her, then away. People talk in saloons. Especially when they've had a few drinks. And yet Wellington trusted him with important business. Wellington trusts money and power, Samuel replied with a shrug. Walter provided information. It was a transaction, not a friendship. Like your arrangement with Wellington. Samuel's eyes narrowed slightly. I told you I didn't know what he was planning for Ben. But you knew enough to warn Benjamin about the rumors in town, about me believing he'd left with Eliza. That was different. How? Naomi pressed. Samuel was saved from answering by Benjamin's return. Horses are ready, he announced. We should move out. As they mounted up, Naomi caught Benjamin's eye and gave a slight shake of her head. He nodded almost imperceptibly. He understood her concerns and would remain vigilant. They continued through the night, the terrain gradually changing as they descended toward the desert floor. The shortcut Samuel had promised did indeed exist, cutting at least an hour off their journey to the main trail to Maricopa. Dawn was just breaking when they crested a rise and saw a solitary rider in the distance, moving at a steady pace along the trail below. "That could be Walter," Benjamin said, shading his eyes against the growing light. "Only one way to find out," Samuel replied, spurring his horse forward. They pursued the lone rider for nearly an hour before coming close enough to confirm it was indeed Walter Jenkins, his thin frame unmistakable even at a distance. When he realized he was being followed, he urged his horse to a gallop, but the animal was clearly tired and no match for their fresher mounts. Finally, seeing escape was impossible, Walter reined in and turned to face them, a rifle appearing in his hands. "Stay back," he shouted as they approached, the weapon wavering between them. Benjamin raised his hands to show he was not threatening. "We just want to talk, Walter." "Nothing to talk about," Walter replied, his voice high with tension. "You had your chance with her, Adams. You left." "Not my fault things didn't work out the way you planned." "This isn't about Naomi," Benjamin said calmly, though Naomi could see the anger he was suppressing. "It's about the map you stole and the other documents." Walter's nervous gaze darted between them. "Don't know what you're talking about." "We know you've been working for Wellington," Samuel chimed in, "and that you double-crossed him." A flicker of surprise crossed Walter's face. "Who told you that?" "Wellington's men are looking for you," Benjamin continued, ignoring the question. "They think you stole the map for yourself." "Which is exactly what you did," Samuel added. Walter's expression hardened. "So what if I did? Why should you get rich while the rest of us struggle? You've got everything else, the girl, the claim." "The map doesn't belong to any of us," Benjamin said. "It belongs to the miners who have been cheated by Wellington for years. With that evidence, we can stop him." Walter gave a derisive laugh. "Very noble, but I've got a buyer waiting in Maricopa who doesn't share your moral qualms. $10,000 cash." "And how far do you think you'll get with Wellington's men on your trail?" Naomi asked, speaking for the first time. Walter's eyes narrowed as he looked at her. "I'll manage, always have." "We can protect you," Benjamin offered. "Help you get to Tucson to the federal marshal, so I can what? Spend years testifying against Wellington." "No thank you." The standoff continued, the morning sun rising higher as they argued. Walter refused to surrender the map, and Benjamin refused to let him leave with it. Naomi could see Benjamin's frustration growing. They couldn't sit here all day, not with Wellington's men potentially closing in. It was Samuel who broke the impasse. "What if there was a third option?" he suggested. "One that gets you your money, Walter, but also ensures Wellington faces justice." Walter's attention shifted to Samuel, interest piqued despite his wariness. "What kind of option?" "A copy of the map," Samuel proposed. "Benjamin knows the terrain almost as well as Harris did. He could recreate the map well enough to satisfy your buyer." "And I keep the original," Walter concluded, considering this, "along with the other documents." "The other documents go to the federal marshal," Benjamin countered firmly. "Non-negotiable." Walter mulled this over, his rifle lowering slightly. "How do I know the copy will be accurate enough?" "Because Benjamin has no reason to cheat your buyer," Naomi pointed out. "His goal is stopping Wellington, not interfering with other mining operations." After a moment's more consideration, Walter nodded. "All right, but we do the exchange here and now." "I'm not riding with you to Maricopa or anywhere else." Benjamin glanced at Naomi, a silent question in his eyes. She nodded slightly. This compromise was better than nothing, and certainly better than a shootout in the desert. They dismounted, and Walter reluctantly produced the lockbox from his saddlebags. Inside, as Benjamin had described, were several documents and a carefully folded map, drawn on high-quality paper with detailed notations in Harris's spidery handwriting. While Samuel kept watch for any approach, Benjamin studied the map intently, committing its details to memory before beginning to sketch a copy on a blank page from Naomi's journal. His drawing was precise, recreating the veins of gold just as Harris had mapped them, including the rich deposit beneath Wellington's property. Walter watched the process with nervous impatience, clearly anxious to be on his way. When Benjamin finally handed over the copy, Walter examined it carefully before nodding in satisfaction. "The original map stays with you," Benjamin reminded him. "But these," he held up the other documents from the lockbox, "come with us." Walter hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "Fine." But if Wellington catches up to you, don't expect me to come to your rescue. Wouldn't dream of it, Benjamin replied dryly. They parted ways there on the desert trail, Walter continuing toward Maricopa and his mysterious buyer, while Benjamin, Naomi, and Samuel turned south toward Tucson and the federal marshal who represented their best hope for justice. Do you think he'll really sell the copy and keep the original? Naomi asked as Walter's figure receded in the distance. Hard to say, Benjamin admitted. Walter's always looked out for himself first, but either way, we have what we need to expose Wellington's operations. Samuel, who had been unusually quiet during the exchange, suddenly reined in his horse. There's something you should know, he said, his expression troubled. Benjamin and Naomi stopped as well, turning to face him. I haven't been entirely honest with you, Samuel continued, avoiding their eyes. About my involvement with Wellington. What do you mean? Benjamin asked, his voice carefully neutral. I wasn't just feeding him information, I was supposed to be his inside man at the land office in San Francisco, help process claims in his favor. Samuel's shoulders slumped. That's how I knew so much about what was happening. Why tell us this now? Naomi asked, suspicion flaring again. Because you deserve the truth, especially if we're going to the federal marshal. Samuel finally met Benjamin's gaze. I want to make things right, Ben, testify against Wellington, but that means admitting my own part in his schemes. Benjamin studied his old friend, weighing his words against his actions. It takes courage to admit you were wrong, he said finally. If you're genuine about making amends, I'll stand by you with the marshal. And if he's not? Naomi asked quietly when Samuel rode ahead a short distance. Then we'll deal with that when the time comes, Benjamin replied. But people can change, Naomi. Sometimes they just need a chance to prove it. She thought about her own journey over the past days, how quickly her certainties had been upended, how readily she had embraced a path she never would have chosen 6 months ago. Yes, she agreed softly, they can. The ride to Tucson was long and grueling, the sun beating down mercilessly as they crossed the desert. They stopped only when absolutely necessary, pushing themselves and their horses to the limit of endurance. By the time the settlement came into view late the next day, all three were exhausted, dust-covered, and parched. But there was a shared sense of accomplishment, too. They had evaded Wellington's men, secured the evidence they needed, and reached their destination against considerable odds. Federal Marshal Harkins proved to be everything Benjamin had heard: a stern, no-nonsense man with a fierce commitment to justice. He listened to their story without interruption, examined the documents from the lockbox, and then sent telegrams to several contacts who could corroborate their claims about Wellington's business practices. If even half of what you've told me is true, he told them after completing his initial investigation, Edward Wellington has a lot to answer for. Land fraud, intimidation, attempted murder, the list is long. Will you pursue charges? Benjamin asked. Count on it, Harkins assured him. I've been hearing rumors about Wellington's operations for years, but never had enough evidence to act. Thanks to you and Mr. Harris's foresight, that's changed. True to his word, Harkins organized a posse of deputies to return with them to Mojave the very next day. Samuel, after giving a full statement about his involvement with Wellington, was granted limited immunity in exchange for his testimony. The journey back was less fraught than their flight had been, the presence of federal lawmen a deterrent to any of Wellington's men who might still be searching for them. As they approached Mojave on the afternoon of the third day, Naomi felt a strange mix of emotions: relief at coming home, pride in what they had accomplished, and anxiety about the confrontation to come. The town appeared largely as they had left it, though there was a tension in the air, a watchfulness in the faces that turned to observe their arrival. Word of their approach with federal marshals had clearly preceded them. Marshal Cooper met them at the edge of town, his arm in a sling but his determination undiminished. Wellington's still at the hotel, he informed Harkins after brief introductions. Has about half a dozen men with him. They've been quiet since the shooting, but they're armed and not likely to surrender peacefully. Let me worry about that, Harkins replied confidently. I've dealt with his type before. As the federal marshals organized themselves for the confrontation, Naomi broke away to find her father. He was at the store, and the relief on his face when he saw her was worth every hardship of the past days. "Thank God you're safe," he said, embracing her tightly. "When I heard shooting and then you didn't return." "I'm fine, Pa," she assured him. "We all are. And we have the evidence Marshal Harkins needs to stop Wellington." Her father held her at arm's length, studying her face. "You've changed," he observed thoughtfully. "There's something different about you." Naomi smiled, thinking of all she had experienced since Benjamin's return. "I found my strength," she said simply. She didn't witness the actual arrest of Edward Wellington. Her father insisted she remain at the store while the federal marshals did their work, but she heard the details later. Wellington had blustered and threatened, claimed powerful friends who would ruin Harkins's career. But in the end, faced with overwhelming evidence and superior numbers, he had surrendered. Eliza, who had apparently argued with her father about his treatment of Benjamin, came to the store before they departed for Tucson to stand trial. "I wanted to thank you," she told Naomi, the haughtiness of their first meeting entirely gone, "for believing me about the ravine. For helping expose my father's crimes. It was Benjamin who gathered the evidence," Naomi pointed out, "and you who warned us about your father's men." Eliza nodded, a faint smile touching her lips. "Perhaps we're not so different after all." "Perhaps not," Naomi agreed, finding she could no longer dislike this woman who had shown unexpected courage. "Take care of him," Eliza said as she turned to leave. "Men like Benjamin Adams are rare." "I know," Naomi replied softly. "I intend to." In the days that followed, Mojave began to return to normal. Wellington's men dispersed, the federal marshals departed with their prisoners, and the town settled back into its usual rhythms. But there were changes, two subtle shifts in relationships and perspectives that would have lasting effects. Walter Jenkins never returned from Maricopa. Rumor had it he had continued west to California with his newfound wealth, though Benjamin privately doubted he would enjoy it for long. Men who lived by deception rarely found lasting happiness. Samuel Hayes, after testifying against Wellington in Tucson, returned to Mojave briefly to settle his affairs before heading north to start fresh. He and Benjamin parted on good terms, their friendship damaged but not destroyed by Samuel's mistakes. As for Benjamin and Naomi, they wasted no more time on misunderstandings or doubts. 3 weeks after Wellington's arrest, they were married in a simple ceremony behind the general store, beneath the cottonwood tree that had witnessed so many of their conversations. "I still can't believe you're really staying," Naomi admitted that evening as they stood on the porch of the Harper place, now their home, watching the sunset paint the desert in gold and crimson. Benjamin's arm tightened around her waist. "Believe it," he said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "I left once to be worthy of you. I won't make that mistake again." "You were always worthy," she told him, turning in his embrace to face him. "I just wish you had believed that." "I believe it now," he murmured, lowering his mouth to hers. "Because you showed me what true worth looks like, not in gold or claims or possessions, but in courage and loyalty and love." The kiss that followed sealed more than their marriage vows. It sealed a promise to face whatever came next together, without secrets or doubts or misunderstandings between them. In the years that followed, Benjamin did indeed establish his assay office in Mojave, providing a vital service to the miners in the area. With Wellington's monopoly broken, smaller operations flourished, bringing new prosperity to the town. Naomi continued to help her father with the general store, but also found time to start a small school for the children of miners' and ranchers' children who had previously had to travel miles for even basic education. Their own family grew first a son, born a year after their marriage, with Benjamin's blue eyes and Naomi's determined spirit. Then twin daughters 2 years later, who kept them both on their toes with their curiosity and energy. Sometimes, on quiet evenings when the children were asleep, Naomi would find Benjamin on the porch, gazing at the distant hills where his gold claim still produced a modest but steady income. "Any regrets?" she asked him on one such night, sliding her hand into his. Benjamin smiled, turning from the view to look at her, still beautiful to him, perhaps more so now that her face reflected the experiences and wisdom they had shared. "Only one," he replied, drawing her close. "That I ever left in the first place. Think of the time we lost." "Not lost," Naomi corrected gently. "Just delayed, and perhaps we needed that time apart to truly understand what we had together." Benjamin considered this, then nodded slowly. "You're right, as usual." His smile turned playful. "I've learned not to argue with a woman who can outshoot most men in the territory and still look ladylike doing it." Naomi laughed, the sound carrying on the evening breeze. "A wise decision, Mr. Adams." As they stood together in the gathering dusk, the lights of Mojave twinkling below them and the vast Arizona sky stretching above, both knew that the journey that had brought them to this moment, with all its misunderstandings and dangers and revelations, had been worth every step. For in finding their way back to each other, they had discovered a truth more valuable than any gold. That love, when built on honesty and trust, could withstand any challenge the world might bring.